Hello, welcome to What the Flick. It's a big day. It's opening day in baseball season. That's why we're all here.
I'm already losing a bet. The season's like 27 minutes old.
That's like every day. That's like every day of the year.
Marlins gave up 3 in the first. What are you going to do?
Hope springs eternal. Anyway, Christy and that is Matt. And Jason Carter's here.
Hi, guys.
Ben Mankiewicz, our gambling degenerate, is here. And we're talking about a movie that's on Netflix.
Some people are on rocks in the movie,
God,
Christy.
can I speak today? It came out a few days ago called Roxanne Roxanne. Tell us about it.
Yeah. You gonna beep up?
No, you're gonna do it.
Oh, hold on.
All right, come on. This movie? All right, wait.
This is uncomfortable already, you guys.
This one's about Roxanne Shanté, an influential rapper who rocked a party. Stars Shantae Adams, directed by. I lost it.
Okay, that was good though.
Yeah, that was good.
Remix.
Anyway,
That was good. I'm glad you stopped because I was like 4 seconds from leaving.
Anyway,
We tried.
So here's the story. So Roxanne Shanté, groundbreaking rapper, responsible for Roxanne's Revenge, which kind of kicked off the whole the longest series of response records in the early 80s. She hit stardom really early in her life and ends up, going through the story of what happens when you get too much money and too much fame too early. It's a kind of fascinating story and directed by Michael Larnell, produced by Pharrell, stars Shantae Adams in the lead role, and it's worth watching. And let's watch a clip.
Out there in the world thinking you grown. What the hell happened to you, Shantae?
Listen, I know the streets are calling, but you must find a way to rise above it.
You don't need him, Shawnee. You got this without him. Let's do this.
So this manages to not fall into the pitfall that so many music biopics fall into, in that it doesn't begin with a flashback, looking back at her life.
It does,
Well,
but then that flashback very self-consciously doesn't deliver on where you think it's going.
Right.
It sets up a rap battle, and then we don't get it.
No, but I mean, like the structure of somebody at the end of their career looking back on their life.
No, that's right.
It's
But
not
I mean,
that
but I just think you make a really good point because even though it initially seems like it's going to mythologize her in some way, and then it doesn't, and it continually, I think, sort of surprises you in the directions that it takes.
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised in the least, you guys. First, because here's what. First, like Matt, you said it so beautifully that Roxanne Shanté was a pioneer. She was a trailblazer for female MCs and for that genre and for hip hop in general. When you do a biopic about music, what's one thing you got to have in the biopic? Oh, what music? Yes. So you have to,
not a lot.
Not a lot at all. And Nia Long, love you, Nia Long. You are probably one of my favorite African American actresses. She played the role of her mom great. I felt like she was more engaging and more fascinating than Roxanne, actually, which was kind of like weird for me. And you have to choose what lane you want to go when doing a biopic. Lifetime's biopics for Whitney, Aaliyah, Tony. They center on the music, whereas I felt this centered more on her life growing up.
It did.
It's
It was a very. What's the director?
Michael Larnell.
He made a very conscious decision when he met her to go in that direction. I mean, it wasn't like an accident. It wasn't like, oh wait, it turns out none of these people can rap. We can't do the music. He thought what's more interesting is the life story and so this was, there was a very deliberate decision not to focus on the music, which I found refreshing because I did not want to see it. But I don't like biopic musicals. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to do it. I'm not interested in that in any way. And I found myself totally drawn into this.
But Ben, and those are great points. I'm sure a lot of people watching share your sentiment. But I think that when you're doing, as I said, when you're doing a biopic about someone who is an artist, yes, you have to really walk that line and be on the precipice of find her life story, because we are interested in how she became Roxanne Shanté. But also the reason why she was so famous was because she was a musician, she was a rapper, and for this younger generation who doesn't know who she is, they're not gonna. If you're billing her as a rapstress that paved the way, then tell us why she paved the way. Give us the receipts on her art. I mean, I don't know. I feel like because I was a fan, and also Salt and Pepper, Queen Latifah, that whole genre of female rap is so powerful and undersold. Michelle's biopic was done right. So fine, the familial element, great, but it's about music. don't cut that out.
I don't know.
But she's interesting though. As you say, Nia Long is so powerful in this. It's such a different role for her. I was blown away by the depth of the performance and how serious it is and how deeply chilling it is as she descends into her own alcoholism and her depression. Like she's a comedian and she doesn't get a chance to show those kind of dramatic chops, and she's great in this.
Great. Yeah. Could have watched the movie. Could have been about the mom.
And Mahershala Ali cannot help but show up and be great. And here he plays a drug dealer who does not have a heart of gold.
That's right. So I mean, that guy. I mean, there are not many people in the history of Hollywood on his trajectory, like where he's already a big star, but he has the potential to be one of the 10 biggest stars going for the next 5 years, something like that, right? And takes a smaller role of a totally 100% irredeemable character.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking like the whole time, like, when's he gonna do the right thing? Because it's Mahershala Ali, and of course he's gonna do the right thing, and he just doesn't. And this isn't Henry Fonda in Once Upon a Time in the West in his 50s saying, I'd like to play a villain that everybody hates, and I mean, this is still on Mahershala Ali's ascent to some extent, and so I found that decision like that is a confident actor, and it pays off. He's terrific. Yeah,
he's scary good. Please,
I like this movie. I hear where you're coming from about the music. I actually would have liked to have seen a little bit more about how Roxanne or Shantae ends up doing, kind of spur of the moment response record to the UTFO hit, and then it snowballs into this thing that none of them expect. And yeah, you could go down the road of like the whole big series of response records, but she does kind of ride this wave. I think you get some good performances. I had forgotten that she had toured with Biz Markie for a while, right? Like so you see this great performance.
I had not forgotten that since I don't understand what the sentence means. But
anyway.
Do you know who Biz Markie is?
Oh baby, you
got what I need.
Bruce Springsteen, Tom Petty, Bob Seger, the Rolling Stones, and Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
End of musical knowledge.
Right.
There are people out there.
I liked, one of the things I think the movie did really well was showing that she's got this fierceness in her own life, right? Like she's got, her personality is such that like she's got very little time for anyone that like gives her attitude. She's strong, or at least she represents, she puts out this persona of kind of ferociousness, and people are coming up to her all the time asking her for rap battles, and she gets to the point where it's like, you got enough money? Because otherwise it's not worth my time. And I kind of bought that, because when you would get her just off the cuff, kind of she would just go at it, I thought that kind of worked. Now it's a little bit different than you see in some, for instance, 8 Mile and some other movies will show you where the lyrics come from, and this one doesn't really bother with that. And granted,
but the swagger behind them makes sense. They established that pretty early.
Right, and this one,
in that first scene, you get the swagger where she says, she looks to her mom right before they start.
And better get that money.
She goes, no, her mom says, get that money, but she goes, can I curse?
Right. I thought this was pretty solid. It did some really interesting things. There's that one sequence where you see her, in bed, and then the birth scene, and then like that one quick.
Pretty subtle.
That was a quick.
That was great.
It's a good edit.
They get you there quickly.
Right, like that was a quick 30-second sequence that I was riveted by.
Yeah, moved you forward like 2 years. Yeah, that's right.
Which was great. There were a couple things it did that took me out of the movie. I'm not sure I would have cast Ad Rock as the Adam Yauch from the Beastie Boys as
Adam
the
Horvitz.
lawyer.
Adam Horvitz.
Adam Horvitz, right.
I thought he was really good.
But also he's wearing the outfit he wore in the Sabotage video, essentially.
I know.
He's
That's
wearing the same
right?
wig and the same outfit.
Right. So they cast Adam Horvitz in that. You see a very young rapper that you later find out who that is.
Who he is. He won't give it
for the
away.
most part, I like this. I think it could have been better. The issue I had is it didn't really grab me emotionally. Like I was never quite in.
Agreed.
I found it more interesting. Like, oh, okay, it's interesting to see kind of Shantae's personal life, before and after her big hit and her tour, but I never felt that invested in her as a person.
But there are moments that made me gasp, though, because they're so horrific. Like what she endures over her arc of becoming famous is pretty hard to watch.
I was emotionally attached to this because I have had friends that have come up in situations like Roxanne and her mom, where money's tight, where you have a black woman who, by all accounts, has to just make it happen for their children, and has that hard exterior. I thought that there were so many scenes that just left you feeling like, okay, well, we're gonna pivot to do this now. Like you had said, what was riveting about the sex scene to the birth scene, that by far was like, okay, someone actually cares about this, because there was no development within the stories. One minute she's walking with her friend, next minute she's stealing clothes out of Ralph cashmere sweaters, then she's saying F you to the place, and then she's living outside, the money's gone. It was just so many things going on
like
that didn't give credence to the story, that didn't, as you said, didn't take you along for the ride.
Yeah, I think where I think it kind of loses its way from time to time is you see a few scenes where you get almost this waiting around and kind of disappointment of expectations, and the first scene that happens with that really early on is the moving day, right? And that drags out, and there's a few moments of that in the movie that happen in various places similar to that, where Shantae thinks something's gonna happen, and then the rug gets pulled out from her, and those are emotional scenes. But then the movie never quite builds on that. It kind of hits that and then just goes back down and
maybe
hits
that's
it again.
realistic. Maybe that's not emotionally giving you the payoff that you expect. It doesn't have this. One thing I admire about it is the daring to not have the beats, no pun intended, the beats that you would see hit in a biopic. Like you never really see the breadth of her fame. You get her girlfriends calling her going, oh my God, I hear you on the radio, but you don't realize in the broader context outside the project, the Queensbridge Projects, how big she was. And I kind of admire the daring of that, because it focuses on this as an intimate character drama.
It's like under 100 minutes, so I imagine there could have been one significant set piece of her performing, maybe on tour, which probably would have satisfied you to some extent, maybe not enough. But I think that would have helped me, because I don't know anything about this, so I had nothing.
But that set piece you're looking for, like she wasn't ever really playing stadium.
Then a rehearsal, something that suggested that would have conveyed the degree of fame that we see, because there was some jumping around, and this is, I guess, just Larnell's second feature. And there were some things that maybe dragged a little bit. This is why I'm not quite as high as I could have been on this, but I'd be totally interested to see his next film, because I bet it's really good. I think this is really good. I think you guys are too obsessed with what it's not. Like most biopics aren't interesting. The overwhelming majority of them aren't interesting. And this one to me was totally, completely interesting, and I was totally invested in her right from the start.
It dared to avoid the cliches.
Yeah, it did. It avoided so many cliches and to me kept me sort of thoroughly engaged, and only because I'd read a review or a synopsis sort of. I'd read a article, not a review, that came out like, hey, you should see this next week, and then I read about Shantae. Before that, I wouldn't have been able to pick her out of a lineup. So
you know so much now.
Right now, I'm like I'm like an expert. Right.
Well, and you're not wrong in that.
Now you can totally quote Illmatic.
Right, and beatbox. Ben, you're not wrong in that. I think, and I'm gonna say this, you guys are probably gonna laugh at me, but a great movie that gives you what you want, even though it received horrible reviews, was Mariah Carey's Glitter, and here's why.
I knew you were gonna say that. I knew Glitter was coming. Everything comes back to glitter eventually, doesn't it?
It does, but because Courtney B. Vance and Mariah Carey back in 2001 knew how to tell Mariah's story, if you will, but also pepper in the music and the time and give you, paint the picture so you can fully go along for the ride. And yes, we have to look at it for what it is. It's a biopic, but if you're gonna have a biopic about a trailblazing female MC, then you have to give us what attached us to her in the first place, and that's the music, and I stand by that.
Okay.
And it would have been that much better.
Okay, right. I want to mention really fast too, the young actress who plays her best friend, Chanel Edmonds, is hilarious.
Yeah, totally.
Because she's more than just like the wacky sidekick.
Right.
She is her hype woman. She's her best friend. She's the first person who believes in her. She's a scene stealer.
And this
so
is
good.
Shantae Adams' debut, right?
Yeah, she wanted a prize, the jury prize for acting at Sundance for this past year.
Yeah,
so yes.
And she'd been in,
so there is a future.
Definitely a future there.
Okay, so I'm saying 6.2. I don't love it, but I like enough about it. It's different.
Right. I give it a 6. I think it's worth watching.
I give it a 5 because movies like Notorious and Straight Outta Compton did it right, and this didn't.
Okay.
I give it 7.8. And Christy, based on the way you talked about it, your number seems too low.
I know,
Yeah.
but I don't want to have to do math all over again. So
You made it 7.2, you just raise it by 0.25, I'm just saying.
okay, 7.2. So now what is my number?
So
That was too,
pull it up,
you
pull it
are
up.
never that persuasive.
What
What is happening?
what was
so
our
now
number
we're
before?
6.6.
6.6. All right, it's
All right, there we
73% on the tomato meter. Ben
I think
wins
we
one
all-
today.
We all feel better.
Ben
now.
won this rap battle. Bye.